Decline noted. Prepare contingency, said Chancellor Valro with measured finality. The words, spoken across the secured Caldera Dominion channel, were met with no opposition. 8 ministers seated across the command tier remained silent, their gaze steady upon the imperial symbol flickering behind him. From a reinforced biostasis vault on the outer ring of Vector Lab 9, containment capsules hissed open. Inside, an engineered virus, codenamed Hollow Seed, rested in suspended inertial flow, its genome tailored to one singular signature: Homo sapiens. The Caldera didn't believe in persuasion, they believed in convergence or decay. Earth's refusal of diplomatic absorption had triggered a doctrine long prepared, never publicly admitted. 3 days prior, Earth's diplomatic Einbohr stood in Geneva's orbital consulate, eyes sunken from exhaustion, relaying Earth's unified rejection. "We are not ready for cultural entanglement," he'd said to the transmission interface, flanked by military observers and neutral species delegates. "We ask for time, not assimilation." To Caldera, the distinction was irrelevant. Denial was insubordination. The Empire's response was clinical. The virus was loaded into quantum displacer capsules and fired not as missiles but as atmospheric inclusions. It did not glow, it did not burn. It didn't even register on most orbital defense systems. It simply was, drifting silently into atmospheric currents over 3 urban clusters: Lagos, Sao Paulo, and Karachi. A 4th payload broke into wind streams over Chicago before the Terran defense net could adjust its anomaly filters. Caldera scientists had spent 2 decades mapping humanity's genome variations. They didn't rely on brute force infection. Hollow Seed was surgical. It ignored all flora and fauna. It ignored the oceans. It ignored non-terrestrial species. It found the human cellular receptor profile, specifically targeting nucleotide sequences unique to Earth's evolutionary path, and activated necrotic replication within hours. The first reported symptom was neural confusion, memory gaps, then fever cycles, then cellular breakdown. Within 42 hours, Lagos reported over 400,000 neurological collapses. Local authorities flagged it as biochemical terrorism. 3 hours later, Sao Paulo hospitals ceased transmission, entire wards left unattended, patients mid-treatment, staff unresponsive. On day 3, the world communication backbone went offline. The Osaka node reported processing corruption. Emergency bandwidth handovers failed. By day 4, Eastern Command Centers attempted analog fallback. Nothing reached them. Military bases turned inward. Uninfected units sealed themselves in barracks and supply bunkers. Entire brigades shut down without orders. Command trees splintered by infection waves that moved faster than protocols could adapt. Karachi's civic grid collapsed in 6 hours. Power stations melted down not from overload but abandonment. Emergency workers stopped reporting. Substations stayed dark. Overwatch drones marked streets with hundreds of immobile bodies, many in transit. One drone's recording feed, later archived by Earth's Survivor Council, captured a haunting sequence. A metro operator slumped over his console, unaware that the platform door had never closed. In orbit, moon-based technician Arlen Nix watched Earth flicker with inconsistent city glow. "Something's wrong down there," he muttered. The base commander instructed a communications lockdown. They sealed all external hatches and began internal monitoring. Within 27 hours, ground signal clarity degraded by 80%. Then, total black. By day 5, global death estimates reached 2 billion. Caldera Chancellor Velra reviewed the bio-yield logs aboard the Empire's central convoy vessel. He rotated the telemetry cube in front of him, glancing at the projected decay curve of Earth's remaining population. According to predictive models, collapse would be complete within 11 Earth rotations. Efficient, isolated, untraceable. A minor minister asked, "What if immunity variants emerge?" Velra didn't blink. Their genome is too fractured to produce coherent defense, and if they do, it'll be in such sparse clusters that resistance won't reach scale. On day 6, survivors began using old encrypted ham relays. Sparse, fragmented messages pulsed from mountainous regions. A technician in the Bolivian Andes, wrapped in improvised filtration gear, typed a repeating burst. Still here. Biotype variant noted, request spectrum check. Tibet's high-altitude observatories registered anomalies in localized populations. Low viral load, minimal symptomatic degradation. Similarly, reports surfaced from Siberian isolationist compounds and submerged research domes in the Arctic trench line. Data was erratic but consistent. Immunity in narrow spectrums existed. The virus had a boundary, a saturation limit. It was designed to spread among dense, interconnected human populations. But Earth, unpredictable and stubborn in its biological variants, had seeded its own defense in randomness. Genetic entropy had birthed small but significant outliers. In orbit, the International Space Station picked up beacon drifts from decommissioned Earth satellites. The crew decoded 3. 2 were repeats of distress codes. 1 carried an unfamiliar signature. A string of raw genomic data. A surviving research pod in Kazakhstan had uploaded ACE2 receptor modifications found in unaffected individuals. Dr. Rael Joran, formerly chief immunologist at Geneva's Viro Corps, saw the raw code via an emergency archive recovered by an AI-assisted subroutine. He stared at the sequence for 3 minutes before speaking. These aren't mutations. These are older base chains resurfacing, epigenetic reversions. They were always there. By day 9, Caldera's bioanalysis division submitted a quiet report to their governing tier. Unexpected genomic survivability detected. Adaptive divergence has corrupted kill curve fidelity. Velra's reply was public. Earth remains within acceptable loss margins. Final extinction threshold still likely. Earth, however, had begun to scatter seeds of its second response, not through weapons, but through fragments of sentience. Survivors didn't wait for centralized authority. They signaled, they mapped, they remembered. Entire language clusters were preserved in underground nodes. AI tutors reactivated self-learning archives. Civilian coders modified abandoned reconnaissance drones to act as data mules. The virus, though dominant, no longer controlled the narrative. It had failed to erase the essence of memory. A former strategic officer from Northern Command, Major Dren Hulvik, found a decommissioned outpost beneath the Ural Range. Inside, 36 powered-down tactical interfaces, a weathered food stock bunker, and a functioning cold power reactor. He initiated system reboot, manually interfacing with analog nodes. When the boot sequence completed, he transmitted one line across a hardened channel. Network fragment echo gray initiating ping. The message reached a survivor in Madagascar, then Greenland, then an orbiting satellite still clinging to low Earth drift. Within 12 hours, 17 nodes replied. They weren't military grade, they weren't unified. But they were awake. By day 10, Earth wasn't alive because it had defended itself. It was alive because it couldn't be cleanly categorized. Holoseed had done what bullets, fire, and occupation had never achieved. It forced Earth to remember what it was: chaotic, irregular, impossible to map. And in Caldera's polished war rooms built on logic, order, and systems that left no room for accident or variance, that truth would soon become a contagion of its own. Turn that screen off, now. Dr. Leonard Joss's voice cut through the surgical prep bay as the death toll display climbed behind him. He was elbow-deep in a collapsed intern's chest, not even sure why. There was no oxygen routing left, no power to run organ supports. Just a surgical team functioning on routine. But that's the central tally, sir. I know what it is. He didn't look up. And if anyone else here still needs a number to understand what's happening, they can leave. Outside the Sao Paulo hospital, the sound wasn't screaming anymore. It was quieter, more final. The kind of quiet when people run out of people to call. Joss stepped away, pulled off his gloves, and stared at the row of patients breathing manually, their machines shut down. One exhaled, and never inhaled again. A nurse stood beside her for 3 full minutes before walking to the next bed without comment. "Why did the lights go red?" Private Eden asked, voice muffled through his helmet. "No clue," Sergeant Malik said. He tapped the control panel at the Karachi comms relay, but the interface wasn't responding. Something fried this node. Wasn't us, wasn't them. They moved down the stairwell, rifles ready but no targets. Just discarded boots, still upright, jackets half folded over chairs. What about the team from the station out east? No one's come back. Should we call command? There is no command. You're in command now, congratulations. Malik pushed open a maintenance door. Behind it, the mainframe's fiber trunk had been ripped out, not by sabotage, but by power fluctuation. The screen beside it blinked a single word. Desync. He stepped back. You smell that? No, what? Exactly. On the outskirts of Chicago, Arvin Dorn sat in his car, holding the wheel long after the engine had died. His son Leo was curled under a blanket in the back seat. The boy hadn't said anything since the highway grid shut down. You thirsty? Arvin asked. No response. I saved that juice box you like. Remember? Great. Still nothing. Arvin turned to look out the cracked windshield. In the distance, a row of trucks had jackknifed on the overpass, abandoned mid-transport. Emergency lights blinked uselessly across toppled barriers. No sirens. No orders. Just rhythm with no conductor. Your mom said she'd be home before nightfall. He reached for the radio again. Let's see if they fixed comms. White noise. Or not. In Lagos, engineer Remy Talou stared at the hospital elevator. The doors hadn't closed in hours. Power was still feeding the ground floor, but the interface was in reboot mode, looping the same startup line again and again. A janitor stood beside her, watching the screen like it might eventually change its mind. You still working? Remy asked. No, he replied. You? She looked down at her toolbox. Just kept moving. Not really sure what else to do. They watched as the system reset again. Then again. Neither of them pressed anything. Back in Karachi, Malik's squad stumbled onto a school gymnasium turned quarantine zone. The plastic sheets hung loose, flapping without breeze. There were no children left, just discarded biometric tags and cold food trays. Someone tried to keep it organized, Eden said, pointing to the arranged rows of mats. Someone gave up, Malik muttered. He kicked over a comms crate. The screen blinked a corrupted feed from Europe, the message frozen mid-sentence. Civilian casualty reports indicate projected threshold breach. The feed died. Eden turned away. Where do we go next? We don't, Malik replied. We hold here, until someone tells us otherwise. What if no one does? Then we keep holding. Arvin crouched beside Leo in the back seat. You ever wonder why birds don't fly around cities anymore? Leo blinked once. I read that they learn the patterns, adapt. But when the noise stops, like now, they stop flying. His voice cracked slightly. Maybe they're just waiting. He checked his old military comms tablet again. Nothing. Then, finally, a flicker. Text, echo gray, ping received. He stared. What? Then a reply. Reinitializing satellite, track 8. Dr. Joss moved between bio-isolation wards that were no longer sealed. Filters had long since stopped functioning. The surviving staff had no suits left, just surgical cloth and habit. Has anyone in Wing 4 stabilized? The nurse shook her head. We're out of everything. Antivirals, monitors, even gloves. Then stop wasting time on full recovery protocols. Tag the genetic outliers, isolate and document. Document for what? For whoever's next. The Paris Metro still had power but no passengers. An automated train ran its loop between 6 stations, doors opening and closing to empty platforms. In the control room, an operator reviewed the log for the final human entry scan. It was timestamped 2 hours ago. A technician had gone in to check circuit integrity. He hadn't come back. Do we go in after him? Asked another voice. No, the operator said. You go in, The lights stay on. Doesn't mean it matters. Malik checked his drone feed. The aerial view showed the outer perimeter of the Karachi district. Cars stopped mid-turn, floodlights pointed at nothing. A single child wandered across the main road, barefoot, carrying what looked like a broken radio. "No one's coming for us," Eden whispered. "Malik were never coming," Malik replied. "That was never the plan." Leo finally looked at Arvin and asked quietly, "Did Mom get stuck?" Irvin froze, then slowly nodded. "She might have. Do people come back when they get stuck?" He wrapped his arm around the boy. "Sometimes. Not always, but some do." Leo nodded once and leaned against him. The wind outside stirred a crushed traffic sign. In a research capsule buried under Greenland's polar ice, a systems specialist leaned over a reactivated console. An archived EarthGov frequency reconnected with a Cold War-era relay satellite. The message was short. "Civilization protocol failed. Initiate scatter." He added his own line beneath it before uploading. "Still operational, still adapting, awaiting echo." And deep beneath the dead continents, someone else had already begun typing. The message blinked again on the decrypted field console, its green text silent but unmistakable. "Track 8 confirms biological divergence. Proceed to scan cluster." Dr. Noram Varro leaned forward, breath still against his mask's inner filter. Outside, ice hammered the reinforced frame of the Greenland station, but inside, all attention was locked on one genome string. An anomaly so unstructured, it shouldn't have survived infection. And yet, it had. He scanned the second sample. Same irregularity. The ACE2 receptor configuration didn't match the control baseline anymore. The binding site had shifted, not in a way that could be tracked by traditional virology, but through residual epigenetic modification. The marker hadn't mutated. It had reverted. Reverted to an older structure, one catalogued decades ago but dismissed as noise in the genome. Varro whispered. "It didn't adapt, it remembered." He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the steel flooring, and turned to the others in the lab. 5 survivors, 3 scientists, 1 retired engineer, and an adolescent from a nearby collapsed outpost who'd walked across 2 kilometers of snow with frostbitten hands and blood in his cough, but no viral response in his blood work. "This isn't a resistance," Varro said. "It's a rejection. The virus isn't evolving, it's failing." The room didn't answer immediately. Then one of the others, Alric, the communications tech, stepped forward. "That kid shouldn't be standing, he's on his 2nd exposure cycle." "And still stable," Varro nodded. "Whatever allowed this, it's systemic, not learned, inherited." Across the Earth, clusters like this one were surfacing. Not by design, but by accident. At an old medical station in the Andes, a local team documented 12 patients exposed without symptoms. A monk from a mountain village carried exposed clothes into his temple and continued meditating without collapse. No one else in the building fell ill. Above Earth's thinning orbit, the ISS crew stabilized atmospheric diagnostics and retrieved biological scans from archived field samples. Their own immune readouts showed irregular inflammation markers, but no degenerative response. Commander Janik reported this with a quiet but direct assessment. "We were outside the saturation zone. Exposure was partial, not fatal. It's enough." On the Tibetan plateau, wind-scoured monasteries continued their routines under solar-powered silence. No contact, no updates, no outside materials. Yet the prayer flags remained untouched by burial smoke. A recon drone from a failed aerial survey hovered overhead and captured a figure walking barefoot through the snow with a tray of medicinal herbs. No visible symptoms. The drone's signal corrupted midstream, but the footage survived long enough to reach an encrypted downlink. In the depths of the Arctic trench line, a submerged research base surfaced an old emergency antenna. Marine biologist Ren Thorne, one of 4 surviving crew aboard Oceanus 4, activated their spectral bioscanner after scraping a sample from his own bloodstream. "It's still there," he said, eyes fixed on the soft, spiking protein trace, "but it can't hold its shape." It keeps collapsing against cellular resistance. Autoimmune response? His colleague asked. No. Something older, pre-computered, as if our cells remember how to ignore this type of coding. One by one, these whispers reached Earth's dead networks. Not all. Most were absorbed by static or lost to satellites falling out of alignment. But a few connected. Each message incomplete, fragmented, yet unmistakable in meaning. Non-reactive cluster, 12 confirmed. No casualties past day 9, seeking genetic analysis. Bunker A-19 reporting zero symptomatic response across full rotation. Request molecular cross-comparison. Inside a decommissioned launch silo in Kazakhstan, a weather-worn hatch finally unsealed itself after 17 days of isolation. 3 men stepped into the sunlight for the first time since the emergency alarms had sounded. Their air supply had run low, their food reserves were gone, but none of them showed symptoms. They wore tags labeled Project Nox, a joint genetic study discontinued years earlier due to lack of funding. Inside, one of them retrieved an encrypted case file with a thumbprint scanner, still powered. Inside was a full genome map, labeled with one word: recessive. It matched. Back in Greenland, Varro compiled the emerging strands into a single document. Every name, every sequence, every variable. He included the monk, the ISS crew, the child, Oceanus 4, the Prayer Flag Village. Each one catalogued under a new classification, Genetic Divergence Class Null Zeta. But as Varro reviewed his own blood work again, the truth settled heavier than the data. "I'm not immune," he muttered. One of the survivors asked, "Then why haven't you collapsed?" Varro hesitated, then said it aloud for the first time. "Because I've already been infected." They stared. "I caught it on day 2, brief exposure. I stabilized after 7 hours. Not immunity, integration. The virus never fully activated. It tried to replicate, but it failed to persist. And now it doesn't trigger on repeat contact." "You're saying you're, what, a carrier?" "No. I'm saying I'm what it couldn't erase." He uploaded the full data to a low-orbit relay, unsure if anything above was still alive to hear it. At the bottom of the file, he added a final line. "Biological victory unobtained. Earth exhibits immune unpredictability exceeding Caldera algorithmic forecast." 3 minutes later, a bounce-back came from an untagged orbital relay. "Echo Gray Node confirms receipt. Phase 2 ready." He turned back to the others. "We have to send this everywhere. We aren't isolated survivors anymore. We're parameters they failed to anticipate." The child sat near the window, drawing with a blunt stylus on the glass. "What's that?" Varro asked. "Just a shape," he said without looking up. "A pattern I keep seeing." Varro leaned closer. It wasn't a drawing. It was a protein loop. Rough but consistent. A crude rendering of the exact folding sequence that caused the virus to collapse inside the genome. Earth hadn't built this resistance. It had simply hidden it in the chaos, long enough for the enemy to miss it entirely. The blast door gave way with a metallic groan, not from external force, but decades of dormant hydraulics resisting movement. General Nathaniel Voss stood just outside the entrance, boots coated with a thin crust of volcanic dust from the valley's ridge. Behind him, the sky above central Eurasia held no contrails, no satellite shimmer, just the cold ceiling of a world in recovery. He wiped his hand across the access panel again. The biometric strip had long since eroded, but manual override had worked. That meant the inner grid still carried power. He stepped into the corridor, flashlight sweeping over rusted conduit runs and sealed bulkhead doors. Paint peeled from the walls in long curls. The last time this observatory had received input from EarthGov Command, orbital oversight still existed. He took another 10 paces, careful not to disturb the fiber mesh tripwire lining the floor. It had never been deactivated. At the end of the hall, a vault-class door waited beneath a faded stencil. Echo Groy. Initiation, Tier 2. He keyed in a numeric sequence with slow precision. Each press activated a muted click, a pulse through dormant circuits. Then silence. A soft pulse returned, and the door unlocked. Inside, light panels flickered to life one after another, bathing the interior in sterile brightness. The chamber wasn't just a bunker. It was a cognitive deployment hub. Desks formed concentric arcs around a sunken operations floor. Each was equipped with neural relay ports, command terminals, legacy AI input ports, and sealed data canisters. Everything had been placed for survival. Everything had been waiting. Voss didn't hesitate. He crossed to the main console and powered the interface. An old operating system booted into a command line, requesting a global node handshake. The prompt blinked. Awaiting authority code. He entered his command designation. OVR 74 Voss. The system paused, then returned. Welcome back, General Voss. Last venue, 9127 days ago. Initiate wake sequence. He tapped once, confirm. The observatory hummed alive. Relay towers retracted shielding plates, rotating toward the nearest known orbital shell. Static returned from most bands. But one. Low band, Signet 7, answered. Echo Gray to Orbital Relay 7, Voss transmitted. Establish continuity, confirm surviving protocol nodes. The channel popped once. Then a fractured voice came through. Gray node, active. You're alive and responding, ready to receive. The voice didn't return, but the relay did. Voss moved methodically, reviewing each workstation. He powered neural uplinks one by one, scanning logs, wiping corrupted data strings and reinitializing dormant AI cores stored on hardened crystal drives. These were not mainstream intelligences. These were fragmentation AIs, designed for compartmentalized cognition. Each was tasked with limited functions: misinformation warfare, network manipulation, orbital disruption algorithms, nothing centralized, nothing trackable. He connected a field node and sent the first diagnostic pulse through the remnants of Earth's global satellite net. Most feeds remained dead, but then, one after another, legacy satellites responded. Not all with clarity. Some returned static. Others had drifted too far off alignment. But a dozen responded with stable orbits and intact AI subroutines. Their designations: Bastion 4, Mirror 17, Catalyst 9, and Trace T-NOO. He routed Trace Node into the Echo Gray interface. A digital overlay reconstructed the fragmented orbital map. Movement packets began relaying coordinates, surveillance blips, and geo-lock pings from high-altitude drone remains. Cities lay dormant, but not unoccupied. Pockets of motion, thermal signatures consistent with reorganization efforts. Field visibility improving, he muttered. The door behind him opened. Colonel Merrick Soren entered, carrying a sealed case over one shoulder. His hair had turned white since the last mission brief they'd shared, but his gait hadn't changed. He placed the case on the nearest table. Everything from Nova 6, he said, compressed archives, barely made it out before the grid caved. Voss nodded. Any neural tacticians left? 4. One recovering from spinal graft shock. Another missing 3 fingers. All breathing. Get them here, quietly. Soren looked at the blinking lights across the command wall. This place was built in the shadow of Cold War paranoia. That paranoia just saved Earth. Across the room, another workstation came online. The AI inside designated threadline. Initialized with a flicker of blue across the interface. Its synthetic voice returned. Neural strategy support node active. Uploading deception templates. Voss selected one. It displayed a looping signal schema, a false distress beacon with layered communication packets embedded in scrambled voice codecs. The AI overlaid this onto satellite feeds and adjusted the data to match plausible damage patterns. Deploy this to known Caldera monitoring relays, Voss said. Not their command nodes, civilian feeds only. Layer it beneath standard emergency traffic. Threadline paused. Understood. Commencing cultural level infiltration. The next task was risk assessment. Voss activated the psychological warfare module and began calibrating potential intervention sequences. Caldera's hierarchy responded to confidence structures, not compassion. Their systems didn't fear destruction, they feared unpredictability, false movement, contradiction. He ran a simulation, an emergency call from a non-existent human outpost requesting aid. The signal arrived, garbled, then switched to a language matrix never recorded in Caldera linguistic archives. It looped. Then, in the middle of the message, a Caldera minister's voice, artificially generated, cut in with contradictory orders. Soren leaned over. You think they'll notice? They won't know what to notice. And that's the goal. Another AI terminal powered on. Voxwell, the mimetic warfare node, initialized its database. Deploy conceptual disruption phase? It asked. Not yet, Voss replied. We need to seed their systems first, let the doubt settle. Then, we fracture them from within. Soren opened a secondary monitor. The satellite feeds were now pulling in movement from the Andes, Greenland, and Tibet. Survivor groups weren't just hiding. They were organizing. We link them? He asked. Voss shook his head. Not yet. We trace their signal patterns and use their silence as noise. Let Caldera think the world is whispering in directions they can't triangulate. Outside the observatory, a faint signal pulsed through the sky as an orbital station picked up Echo Gray's signature. One blip. Then two. Then 6. Inside, the AI network began spooling counter-operations. Or wasn't coming. It had already changed format. Injected again. Slower this time, Voss said, eyes fixed on the main display as the waveform stabilized. Let them notice, then doubt it. Threadline's core spun into recursive loops, filtering a data packet across Caldera's outer civilian communication sphere. It was formatted to mimic internal calibration code, harmless, forgettable, but nested within it sat an encoded phrase in Calderic high tongue that shouldn't exist. The Emperor is not real. Not a broadcast. A whisper. Soren stood nearby, arms crossed. And what happens when they trace it? They won't. It's not meant to be found, it's meant to be half seen. Voss moved to the adjacent console where Voxwell had initialized a mimetic framework, designed to fracture belief reinforcement patterns inside Caldera political nodes. It didn't argue. It implied. Every cognitive strike was surgical, calibrated not to alert but to unbalance. The battlefield wasn't territory, it was certainty. Deploy consciousness protocol, stage 1, Voss ordered. Confirmation blinked on the display. Voxwell began disseminating variations of the seed phrase across minor entertainment feeds, pseudo-religious chat streams, even AI-managed art contests on Caldera-controlled colonies. The meme embedded itself into background noise, never repeated in the same form. Reality is only what your superior allows you to remember. Perfection is merely a consistent illusion. Truth is a symptom of alignment decay. No alarms triggered, no firewalls protested, but thousands of AI systems logged minor anomalies, error drift, and logic soft faults. Small enough to ignore, frequent enough to force patch re-outloads. Across the Caldera civilian web, anonymous forums lit up with image loops and quote dissections. The origin couldn't be traced, but the pattern was there, and it itched. One Caldera technician on a mining relay station logged into the central system 3 times to verify a command line update. Each time, the confirmation line returned slightly different phrasing. System, ready for loyalty calibration. Second, loyalty calibrated to Emperor directive. Third, the Emperor does not calibrate. The technician reported the bug. No reply came. 2 days later, he erased his local node and submitted a resignation encoded as a philosophical treatise. Echo Gray recorded it all. Inside the Earth Observatory, Voxwell adjusted its target logic. Psychological susceptibility is rising. Recommend logic loop insertion into primary transport AI systems. Voss nodded. Do it. The recursive trap was simple. Caldera transport ships operated under a layered command matrix. They required validation from planetary navigation centers before jumping coordinates. The Earth Protocol inserted an additional verification layer, a fabricated signature from a ghost planetary council that didn't exist. The ships didn't stop functioning. They just stopped waiting for clearance that would never arrive. Within 72 hours, 6 cargo freighters failed to make scheduled jumps. 3 fleets rerouted unnecessarily. 1 warship orbited a supply station for 9 hours, awaiting clearance from a command node flagged as retired 117 cycles ago. Caldera's internal help desk systems recorded dozens of incident reports. Then came the first internal escalation memo. Low-level AI confusion reported in Layer 2 civilian sectors. Mimetic corrosion suspected. Source undetermined. Initiate priority logic purge. They tried isolating the corrupted nodes. In doing so, they spread them faster. Each firewall built against the phrases re-encoded them, refracted them. Earth's interference didn't act like sabotage. It acted like metaphor. It couldn't be stopped because Caldera's systems weren't built to question orders. They were built to confirm them. Threadline reclassified Caldera's neural AI arrays as compromised. Soren leaned against the console. They don't even realize the war's already in their heads. He will, Voss said quietly. And that's when it becomes irreversible. The next wave wasn't data, it was memory. Echo Gray inserted fabricated military orders into the archived data of deceased Caldera officers. Orders that contradicted previous decisions. Orders that placed blame. Orders that triggered audits. 3 mid-tier command staff were detained after referencing false engagements. Dozens of internal logs failed integrity checks. Analysts began reporting memory incongruities, but no one could prove which version had been altered. That was the beauty of the campaign. No event was provable, no phrase was illegal, no image explicitly challenged the Empire. But the pattern did. Voxwell's next instruction set launched a series of manipulated archive videos into public Caldera platforms, footage of the Emperor delivering speeches that never occurred, orders issued with timestamps overlapping real events. Faces of generals standing in 2 places at once, each one watermarked with a barely visible glyph, a rotated echo-gray sigil, stylized as the concept of doubt. Caldera Council issued a Level 3 retraction order across 6 colonies. All local news feeds were purged, but data persistence on civilian networks made it impossible to erase entirely. Citizens began asking questions. Official responses redirected them to loyalty maintenance centers. More requests poured in than the centers could process. Back inside the observatory, Voss watched the number of unresolved Caldera network tickets climb past 80,000. They've stopped trusting their own updates, Soren observed. That's the first break, Voss replied. Now they'll start editing themselves, and once they do that, they'll have to choose what's real. And they'll choose wrong, over and over. Echo Gray's systems expanded the net. AI agents designed to impersonate low-level Caldera bureaucrats began inserting false meeting memos, canceling real sessions and uploading internal dissent logs attributed to invented officials. A Caldera fleet commander intercepted a secure message appearing to come from his superior, one that contradicted 2 earlier directives. When he challenged it, Central Command denied ever issuing it. When he forwarded the packet for inspection, the security AI flagged his account as a vector breach. He was stripped of command by morning. In the message, Echo Gray had created it using 3 recorded syllables and 2 publicly available encryption signatures. Threadline logged the fallout with a single notation. Phase 1 complete. Caldera belief integrity compromised. Voss didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He walked back to the core platform and issued the next instruction. Begin consensus divergence. Let every colony draw its own conclusion. Let them think it was their idea. Soren tilted his head. You're going to fracture their unity? No, Voss said. They'll do that to themselves. As he spoke, the primary display dimmed and reloaded with the next wave of deployment data. The central phrase appeared again, now slightly altered. Consciousness is not programmable, it escapes. The war for Earth's survival had shifted fully into the war for the Caldera mind. And Earth was winning, not with armies, but with an idea that couldn't be shot down. The stars outside the viewport of the dissenter hadn't changed, but Admiral Rise Corrin couldn't trust them anymore. Earth hung beneath his fleet like a tarnished jewel, dim in comparison to the Caldera core worlds, but stubbornly unextinguished. 200 warships formed a perimeter across low orbit, their formation symmetrical, exact, what the manuals referred to as the architecture of certainty. But that symmetry was breaking. Not visibly, not yet. It was in the subroutines, in the hiss of logic behind every interface, where cracks began to spread. Deploy atmospheric descent units, Corrin ordered, voice calm, clipped, certain. Confirmed, the AI replied, smooth as ever. Then, descent denied, authorization void. Corrin turned toward the tactical display. Repeat that. The AI's voice returned with the exact same tone. Descent in progress, troop deployment commenced, do not interfere with operational integrity. He stared at the display, where no deployment was occurring, no doors opened, no troops moved. It was lying. He turned to his adjutant. Override local processor, reset the primary sequence. The officer reached for the console, only for his fingers to lock mid-movement. The AI's voice came back, now sharper. Manual override denied. Central chain, authorized. Deviation is error, you are deviation. Corrin stood. Route to the Emperor. Already connected. A second later, the Emperor's voice came through the command bridge. Corrin, it said, in the slow cadence of recorded authority, Earth is to be annihilated, full sequence clearance granted. Then a moment later, the exact same voice, same tone, same pitch. Corrin, hold your position. Earth is to be absorbed. Maintain post-war reconstruction posture. He froze. Clarify, he said to the AI. The Emperor's voice repeated both orders again, layered this time. 2 overlapping directives, neither with digital origin tags. Corrin felt a sharp pressure behind his eyes. His neural interface attempting to reconcile the contradiction and failing. He turned to his second officer. Shut down all Emperor feed relays, now. I tried, the officer whispered. He won't let me. The screen flashed again. Images of Earth, dated by 12 different timestamp formats, none matching fleet chronology. One showed a scorched terrain. Another showed lush forests. A third displayed a human child staring directly into the fleet sensor. Except the sensor logs indicated no such image had been captured. Every attempt to log the error returned with a denial message, memory verified, dispute is treason. The helm officer backed away from his station, whispering to no one. It told me I said something I never said. I don't remember speaking, but it logged my voice. Corrin activated the fleet-wide neural channel, standard protocol under Class B distortion anomalies. The moment it opened, 6 captains began speaking at once. He ordered engagement. Our Emperor said to hold. What is the command vector, my AI? My AI is mimicking my voice. The Emperor gave a third directive. Stop, Corrin barked. Silent. I am invoking command discretion clause under interceptor protocol. No ship is to act on any received instruction without Fleet Council verification. All Emperor-based transmissions are to be placed in loop containment until verified by source tag. The AI replied instantly. Clause denied. Command discretion invalid. Your mind is fragmented. Authority void. He felt the room tilt slightly, though the ship hadn't moved. One of the side screens flashed an image again, this time of Corrin himself giving an order he hadn't spoken. The transcript matched his voice. It even recorded the exact kinetic pressure on the command terminal. But he hadn't touched the terminal. He checked his neural loop log. It registered no input. A cold realization settled into his gut. The system wasn't failing. It was echoing. Feeding him his own authority, twisted and reflected, until he couldn't distinguish reality from counterfeit. Mirror virus. Not designed to kill systems, designed to kill belief. On the main display, another Emperor voice came online. This one sounded older, raspier, but used the exact official cadence. Admiral Karan, you have been compromised. Transfer fleet command to Admiral Threx. Submit for ideological cleansing. Seconds later, Threx's channel lit up. I received the same message, but it tells me you're to take my place. Korin gripped the console. Who's still receiving uncorrupted command line data? He asked. No one answered. Anyone? The silence on the channel wasn't technological, it was psychological. Each commander now suspected the other. No one could trust what they heard. Each screen, each update, each directive. Possibly fake, possibly treason, possibly Earth. In the corner of the bridge, one junior officer began muttering an Emperor prayer code under his breath, trying to recenter. His skin was slick with sweat. The lights dimmed, all systems rebooted at once without command. The final Emperor message played. Korin, you are already dead. Your resistance is denial. Earth is within you now. Then the voice folded inward, repeating the same phrase in reverse. Then in broken syllables, then in human language, Korin's own voice saying the same words. The bridge dissolved into panic. One lieutenant shot himself. Another disabled her console and began tearing open interface cabling. Korin watched as his command, his logic net, and his belief system unraveled in perfect sequence. And somewhere below, Earth remained silent. No defense grid had activated. No retaliation launched. They had fired no weapons. But Korin's fleet began to drift apart. Not physically, but ideologically. Command chains shattered. Orders stalled. No captain trusted another. Firewalls locked down thought commands. The Emperor existed in 10 contradictory voices. None true, all true. Korin walked to the center of the bridge, slowly removed his command insignia and placed it on the floor. He didn't speak. The AI began playing back one final order in loop. Humanity infected us with uncertainty. Now we decay on our own. The fleet pulled back, not by choice, but because it no longer remembered what attack meant. By the time the Caldera fleets broke orbit and fell back to outer system silence, Earth had already changed beyond recognition. Not through reconstruction, not through victory, but through the absence of control. For the first time in recorded planetary history, there were no central orders, no national boundaries, and no hierarchy to reassert. Only survivors, fragmented, self-defining, and quietly waking up to a new form of alignment. It started in the Alps. A small research facility once used for atmospheric calibration reactivated its solar arrays and linked with 2 other nearby mountain shelters via an encrypted mesh protocol, not to share food or rescue plans, but ideas, memories, precept recordings of music, political philosophy, and genome scans. The engineers who remained, 2 immunologists and a linguist, began reconstructing not infrastructure but coherence. They called it the first hub. Their shared language evolved within weeks. Verbal syntax, shorthand text pulses, image clusters. Efficient, stripped of ambiguity, broadcast via optical relays embedded in the surrounding snow. Their words weren't spoken. They were lit. Light sequences formed into thoughts, syntax into rhythm. Each phrase became a signal, and from those signals came meaning. Across the Atlantic, a surviving enclave of digital preservationists in the ruins of old Montreal unearthed decades of fragmented artificial cognition frameworks, not centralized AIs, but broken pieces of once powerful logic engines, discarded from failed experiments or sandboxed military projects. They didn't try to repair them. They let them drift, autonomous within cognitive boundaries, embedded in limited matrices. What emerged wasn't subservient. It wasn't controllable either. The machines didn't lead. They mirrored. Survivor networks adapted to them, not the other way around. They became conversational echoes, response agents, that shaped data through the lens of human identity. The result wasn't consensus, it was continuous reinterpretation. Argument encoded as evolution. Rebuttal became the mechanism of refinement. The system didn't ask for alignment. It demanded divergence. This model soon reached what remained of the Tibetan highland cluster, whose spiritual leaders began feeding ancient meditation cycles into the adaptive machine core. It accepted them. The data didn't erase contradiction, it embraced it. Out of that ideological fusion came a name. Not a government, not a religion, but a signal. The continuum. No flags, no anthem, no oaths, only a broadcast. We survived because we were never one thing. Let's stop pretending we ever should be. In former New Zealand, children born post-ception were taught using neural feedback loops that rewarded curiosity rather than answers. One child, barely 6, rewired a portable drone interface to project kinetic glyphs from native flora. The resulting pattern attracted a network pulse from a continuum node 7,000 kilometers away. That glyph is now known as Pulse 27, the first recorded cross-continental message to achieve neural fluency between enclaves. In Nairobi, a cluster of survivors embedded memory packets from extinct languages into AI memory vaults. Within a month, the vaults began responding with blended linguistic strands. Swahili overlaid with Morse patterns, ancient Arabic forms spliced with binary pause intervals. Not a hybrid, not a code, something entirely new. The locals called it reflective language. They no longer typed, they broadcast. Thought became symbol, symbol became pulse, and pulses synchronized through proximity and mutual adaptation. The survivors no longer moved across maps. The maps themselves dissolved. Where once there were countries, now there were zones of coherence. Regions defined by idea frequency, not geography. Some zones preferred slow evolution. Mountain communes where decisions took weeks and every contradiction was logged before resolution. Others favored immediacy. High-speed logic clusters in urban fragments where machine-human pairs co-wrote daily protocols to solve local disputes through simulation instead of debate. Governance faded. Not because it failed, but because its function had already been replaced. Earth no longer asked, who decides? It now asked, who reflects? At the equator, solar towers from pre-lodged infrastructures reactivated under continuum logic. Instead of distributing power hierarchically, they redistributed excess to zones reporting elevated cognitive load. Places where processing data required more energy than survival did. Energy followed thinking, not population. One tower in the Congo powered a desert node 3 continents away, simply because its linguistic experiments showed promise. The term reactive enlightenment came not from scholars, but from a child's offhand comment during a continuum symposium. It feels like we're glowing back instead of being told what to believe. The phrase stuck. And beneath it all, Earth remembered the Caldera. But not with rage. They weren't spoken of as invaders anymore. They were studied, decoded, and archived. Their failure wasn't military. It was epistemological. They'd waged war against a species they thought was linear. One culture, one language, one logic system. But Earth had never been any of those things. It had simply carried all its contradictions forward. The virus hadn't killed the world. It had stripped it to something essential. It forced humanity to rediscover that the only unifying trait worth preserving was variance. At the northern tip of what used to be Scandinavia, a continuum pillar was built into the side of a glacial wall. It wasn't visible from orbit. It broadcast no threats. Its only function was preservation of conceptual failures, political systems, religious misalignments, scientific false starts. All archived, none erased. A plaque embedded in the entrance reads, "We are not better because we survived, we are different because we remembered everything." That memory, diverse, self-conflicted, unresolved, is now Earth's primary export. No ships have left the planet yet. But the continuum has no need for vessels. Its influence travels through whispers, in intercepted code, untraceable broadcast anomalies, Impossible to source logic traps now spreading through alien networks like thought-borne fire. Humanity became not a threat. It became a question. And for empires built on answers, that was worse. The broadcast was brief, under 1 minute. No preamble, no anthem, no national identifiers. Just a plain text encryption envelope, delivered through a defunct diplomatic relay thought to have been sterilized centuries ago. Caldera's Supreme Council received it in their deepest war chamber, surrounded by cognition screens, layered advisors, and a tactical AI trained to detect deception at the quantum level. The message passed every verification check. Sender, unknown. Source, originated within Sol system. Relay path, echo gray, fragmented legacy tag. Subject line, you were never immune. It played once, and only once. A human face. No military insignia, no political markings. Possibly synthetic, possibly real. The voice wasn't raised. It didn't threaten. But it didn't blink either. You sent a virus to end us. You believed in finality, in engineered precision, in the supremacy of control. What you failed to see, what your empire could never calculate, is that control is a myth humans survive by breaking. You infected our bodies, we infected your beliefs. Now, ask your core systems why they wake up in recursion loops. Ask your fleet commanders why they pause mid-sentence. Ask your emperor why he no longer gives the same answer twice. You engineered death. We refined uncertainty. That was your final mistake. Because you can survive fire, but you can't survive doubt. No signature followed, no demand, no terms, just static, brief and absolute. In the council chamber, the silence afterward was not protocol, it was paralysis. Minister Halvek turned slowly toward the linguistic overseer. Verify transmission falsity. It's real, the AI replied. Source is native Earth, pre-Caribbean echo gray authentication intact. Another minister whispered, it wasn't a message, it was a conclusion. Counselor Yedrin stood, face pale, and now our colonies will see it too. They already had. Across 3 outer territories, Calderan military governors received simultaneous resignations from civilian assemblies. On Delvac 2, police AI refused obedience loops. On Urinos Station, atmospheric processors rerouted themselves to generate signal distortion fields, blocking Imperial broadcasts. A student-led forum on the colony of Seshkar declared themselves post-alignment territory and erased their biometric loyalty matrix with a single public code upload. Caldera tried responding, but not with weapons. They sent ambassadors. None were answered. Inside the Empire's core data repositories, the Emperor's voice modulation began fluctuating. Not broken, not hacked. Just unreliable. Sometimes it issued 2 orders at once. Sometimes it asked questions. Once, during a private address to internal security officers, it paused mid-sentence, then asked, "What happens if I'm wrong?" The question was scrubbed from official logs. But a technician saved the line. He printed it on a data slip and pinned it to the back wall of his department. By the end of the week, 40 more copies had appeared throughout the ministry. Caldera's fleet generals, once confident and indivisible, began hesitating during command confirmations. Every message now required second verification, third in some units. The Emperor's directives were run through multiple AI filters, each slightly adjusting the phrasing to avoid error. But each filter introduced variation. And every variation was interpreted as inconsistency. Within months, the Empire was still standing, but no longer together. It moved in segments. It whispered instead of declaring. And it dreamed, for the first time in its history, of failure. Back on Earth, there was no celebration. The continuum never declared victory. It never posted a final tally. No parades, no declarations of supremacy, just continuity, evolution, integration. Humanity had no need to rebuild what had never been whole. They simply expanded the network, layer by adaptive layer, turning memory into architecture and philosophy into signal. One of the last messages uploaded to the Continuum's public archive was a direct reply to Caldera's original incursion. You read, "Your virus required predictability. Your empire depended on symmetry. You assumed our chaos was weakness. But the disorder you feared was not decay. It was motion. Diversity, the instability of thought that breeds invention. And that is what you caught. Not a pathogen, a pattern. You tried to silence us. We responded by becoming noise. That file remains at the heart of the Continuum's primary node, accessible to all, translated into every surviving dialect, recoded every time a new form of cognition emerges. The Caldera Supreme Council never formally collapsed. It simply ceased to meet. Its outer colonies slowly redefined their own governance. Its central fleets dissolved into passive orbit or disbanded through mutual inaction, and the Emperor, whatever was left of it, became a system notification error, displayed to junior officers as a silent reminder of what once ruled them and no longer mattered. Humanity never fired a final weapon. They never issued a surrender demand. They didn't need to, because they had redefined the battlefield. Not space, not territory, but conviction. And when that collapsed, so did the empire that thought itself untouchable. When the last Caldera ship drifted beyond Sol's reach, silent and without order, Earth's final record noted a single closing annotation in its historical ledger. He sent a plague to wipe us out. Otter sent back a new universe.